So, at the heart of the matter, as I said, is the pattern. Let me give you a little bit of a background about this pattern, just to give you a sense of the appreciation, maybe, that why am I even doing this? Back in the end of 2001, we happened to stumble across a Torah study group in Portland, Oregon. Christian-minded, going through the Torah parashah week by week on Saturday. I believe the guy had been in Church of God, so he grew up in that, and that was all foreign to me. I was raised up Presbyterian church and Baptist school, Christian-believing family, and I'd gotten some Seventh-day Adventist neighbors who were talking about the Sabbath day, but it's like, yeah, well, whatever. And then other people were talking, talking smack about the Christmas tree, and it's like, whatever. I mean, really. So anyway, I started going to this congregation, and he might have had the book sitting there, Fossilized Customs by Lou White. And in seeing this, it's like, wow, this is the mother lode of information, the names of the days of the week, where'd they come from? What is it, the root, the base of Valentine's Day, Halloween, Christmas, Easter, names of the days of the week and the names of the months and all. And I, throughout my life had heard rumors of this and that, but this was the collection of all the stuff. Lou White did a great job at that book. Since then, it's got more complicated. And similar to Frank Seekin's book, somehow I had stumbled into, his friend asked me to go, I don't even know what it was, but I think it was some sort of maybe MJAA, Messianic Jewish Association of America. Some speaker was in town, and I didn't pay to see the speaker, but I went with another friend, and so I was just milling around at the bookstore while the guy was speaking. I don't know what they were talking about, but I was looking at the bookstore, and I happened to see Frank Seekin's book, and I happened to buy it. And that was years before. I'd flipped through and seen these Hebrew letters, and it's like, it was just like this seed dropped. And it was probably 6, 7, 8 years later that I actually, what are those pictures of those letters? And that was the first taste of any paleo anything where the letters were actually pictures. And then Frank Seekins showed how they were evolved into the modern and the Arabic and Russian and English and all. That's as far as the connection went. But at this Torah study, one day, well, let me back up. This was 3 years in. We had been going through the Torah cycle. My brother, my older brother there in Portland, had a friend who was a missionary in Nigeria. And my brother got a copy of the Wycliffe Bible Translator's Book of Luke, the Jesus film. And these guys it started out the whole book, verbatim, every word, but then they had to reduce it down to where it would be watchable without people having to be distracted and all. And they took this and translated it into hundreds of languages. And even to this day, they're taking this book of Luke, and my brother's been working on this thing called the Kolo, K-O-L-O app that you can get on Android or even Apple. And if you punch in Kolo and you see your flag, you hit that button and you'll hear languages, and if you identify your language, then the Jesus film comes up and they'll sit there and play the Jesus film, the book of Luke. So people all around the world right now are able to hear the gospel, the book of Luke, in their own language, which is a phenomenal, huge, they're flooding the world with these little Android things, and you can be out in the middle of anywhere and hear the book of Luke in your own language. But before that happened, before they were actually got that far, they took this video projector and a little generator, and they drive out to the middle of Nigeria with his friend, and 2 or 3 of them hang up a bed sheet and project this movie. And you got to figure, these guys never read the Bible, never been to church, never seen a movie. They don't know anything about the story of the gospel. Imagine how you would see this. a different culture. You see these Roman soldiers, and they never went to school and saw an encyclopedia of what Roman soldiers look like. This is like, might as well see spacemen from Mars or something. You know, I mean, they're, yeah, E.T., the extraterrestrial. I mean, that's literally what this movie might look like. And then all of a sudden, they see these soldiers grab this guy and pin him to this cross and stick him up, and it's like, is this a children's film or what are we watching? I mean, barbaric torture of, do we really want our kids to? But then the guy pops back to life 3 days later and flies up in the sky, and he says he's coming back, and if you believe the story, if you believe this story that we just showed you, you can live forever. What a deal. Easy as that. Poof, done, just believe. Thousands, tens of thousands of people responding all through the middle of Nigeria. But then they'd say, well, now what do we do? Well, read the Bible. No, they don't have a Bible. In fact, they don't even have a language in print. Well, go to church. There's no churches. Well, go talk to your pastor. There's no pastors. Well, what do you do? And he was saying there, like, well, time's up here. We got to hop in the Land Rover and go to the next village and show the film. And they did, and the same thing happened. What do we do? Place after place, this is happening. This is over in 2004. And my brother came back and said, man, this is a bit of a problem. And I'd been in the Torah study, and I said, well, this is actually Yahweh's problem. Why don't we just pray and ask Yahweh to do something about it? What do you give somebody who can't read, has no Bible, doesn't know the gospel, and yet they're supposed to walk this path of instruction? And there's no teachers. And yet, according to the Christian model that I learned, Presbyterian, if they were unfortunate enough to be born over there, too bad, you're going to hell. You never learn the story. Really? Yep, that's the Christian message. You don't believe in Jesus because you never heard you're going to burn in hell. It's rather disturbing, but hey, tough luck for them. Woohoo! Lucky for us, we're Americans, and we get to hear the story and believe, and so we get to go, but bummer for those guys. Something about that is very disturbing to me. But anyway, yeah, is it true? That's another question. Well, according to the Presbyterian Baptist model that I was taught, it is the truth. So now you have to say, well, how do we tell? Which is why I'm saying there's something in the pattern, there's something in Yod He Vav He Achad, there's this plumb line. The reason I'm telling you these things is because this is a very sincere matter on my personal heart. And finding the pattern, finding the truth, how do we know whether the doctrines were taught by 500 years of Presbyterians, being burned at the stake by the Catholics because they wanted to believe the truth, and now I'm going back and saying, oops, sorry, you guys didn't have the truth either, which means by your own standard, you guys are going to burn in hell. Pretty tough situation. So anyway, within like just a couple weeks, a week and a half or so of saying, Yahweh, give the Nigerians something, please, not even knowing what that would look like, the preacher at the congregation Torah study I was at says, I'm going to show you where the traditional Jewish wedding ceremony, which is staged, first they do this, and then they do this, and then they do this, and then and then here's the wedding ceremony, then here's the big party. Interestingly enough, that follows the pattern of the festivals, the Moedim. Passover, unleavened bread, Shavuot, Yom Teruah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Shemini Atzeret, and if you don't know Hebrew, I'm just going blah, 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 blah. But nevertheless, he said it fit the pattern. And I remember from my Christian days hearing, okay, Jesus is with us, he's walking around, and he talks about this wedding thing, and he says here, it's like this parable, and he's going to go away and prepare a place and come back at the sound of the trumpet and half the people, 5 bridesmaids, half the people who are expecting to be with him forever get to go in, and the other half get the door slammed in their face because they don't have some oil, and they are rejected and fall into the lake of fire and tormented forever. And that somehow follows the traditional Jewish wedding ceremony. Well, I don't know anything about the traditional Jewish wedding ceremony, so when the guy says, hey, look it, you can follow it step by step by step, 7 steps. It's like, well, he had my attention because I thought it would be an interesting subject. As he's talking, because for the last three years, that was the beginning of 2002, 2003, 2004, I didn't go every week because I was still going to church for a while on Sunday, and then this was on Saturday, and it's kind of like you have 2 rivers. And they say it takes a number of miles down before the 2 rivers become one, because this river has a temperature, it has a speed, it has a current, it has a character, and then you get this other character, and when 2 people get married, there's this turmoil, but after a while, it's called a confluence, but after a while, you've got one river. But see, if you have this Christian New Testament, New Covenant mind, and then you are trying to incorporate this Old Testament, Old Covenant, Torah-based mind, man, there's this challenging interface of, gosh, does one get negated for the sake of the other, or do they just kind of say, let's just both get along, or don't ask, don't tell, or, gosh, it takes a while before they harmonize or become echad, one. The same thing was happening in me, learning this new information, and I'm saying this to say that if this feels like that to y'all, that's just the way it is. Don't feel like you're out of place. That's just the way it is. And so when I was at the last session, they're trying to describe this duality, this juxtaposition of these 2 frames of thought. I'm trying to acknowledge that it feels like a problem, a discrepancy. Gee, is Paul a liar? Is he a heretic? Is he sent in by the Pharisees to subterfuge this Christian sect and make them look like a bunch of liars so that the rabbis can say, look at those guys, they're a bunch of fools? That's a Jesuit tactic, just so you know. They've admitted to it. Was Paul like the first Jesuit, as it were? But if even the Jesuits are doing it as a way of fighting for their faith, they're not trying to be bad guys. Anyway, my point is, this is rather disturbing stuff and disturbing information. So when this fellow teaching says, look at the traditional Jewish wedding ceremony, well, that's from ancient days. The 7 festivals, well, that's from ancient days. As a matter of fact, the clearest place it's mentioned is Leviticus 23. It's also mentioned in Numbers and Deuteronomy, but it's really clear, Leviticus 23. But the Christian church, some of them don't teach Leviticus at all. And if it is at all, like Ellen White said, well, that's ceremonial law, we have nothing to do with it. And so I know some Seventh-day Adventist people who conflict with other SDAs about the festivals. As a party line, the SDA church wants nothing to do with the festivals, and if you do think about or talk about or attend festivals, you're shunned, you're kicked out, you're thrown away, because it has nothing to do with their paradigm. Paradigm is like this skeletal structure, an engineered apparatus where everything is organized to fit. When I'm doing these shapes, it's like a backbone and ribs, which lines up with the picture of the letter Samic, which has to do with an engineered structure like a lattice, or like a power pole of holding electrical wires. That's all a Samic structure, like the mast of a ship. So doctrinal groups, denominations or religions or politics, they get this paradigm, they get this structure that everything arranges on nicely. And so when you hear new information, like you might hear here, in fact, we were just talking about this, you get this information, it's like, where do I put this? Well, put it right. No, it doesn't fit there. It's almost like they already have their jigsaw puzzle finished. And if you give them another piece, it's like, I don't know where to put this. Well, just stick it over there. So if in your whole mind you spend your whole life, 20, 30, 60, 80 years figuring out what life is about, here, this is how it works. picture of history, picture of all my education, picture of all the religious training I could possibly get, and every Bible I can read, and I think I got it figured out. The jigsaw puzzle looks pretty finished, and somebody walks up with a piece that doesn't fit your jigsaw puzzle, and yet they're saying this is truth. What do you do with it? What we're suggesting is you got the wrong jigsaw puzzle going. And you'll have to either take some pieces out and stick this other piece in. It's like, whoa, why should you do that? You spent your whole life trying to get it in order. So what I'm saying is, by nature of the design, that just the stuff we're dealing with, this is very disturbing, very awkward. If you had a jigsaw puzzle and you're missing a piece, and it's like, boy, did the dog run off with it and chew it up? Or I can't find this piece. And then somebody says, oh, hey, here's this Torah stuff, and poof, plug it in. You go, well, isn't that dandy? It fits just real nice. That would be easy. But I'm saying it doesn't really feel like that, because now I'm going to use the model. The pieces that they gave us, some of them are twisted the wrong way or backwards or upside down, and it looks like it fits, and so it looks like this new stuff doesn't fit. And I'm suggesting that if we really had the right pattern, if we really knew exactly what this Torah was about, and we really knew exactly who Yeshua was, and if we really knew what Paul was saying in truth, truly translated, if we really knew Cohen, Kaf, Hey, Noon, look, say, truly, yes, thus, say, behold, here it is. Eric, Bean, Sefer, these words, if we really knew it, the puzzle would be perfect, beautiful, complete, and would all make sense. And what we're doing here together, talking about the calendar, talking about when does the day start, is somebody saying, hey, look, we had the puzzle piece upside down, and it still looked like it fit, but when you try to plug everything else in, something doesn't fit. So if you turn this around, it seems to make sense, because it's not the same puzzle like a jigsaw puzzle we have. It's a multi-dimensional jigsaw puzzle, like a Rubik's Cube, and it all has to fit. You can take a Rubik's Cube and make it work, and if you have one square out of whack, it's not the formula solution. Something's wrong. So what we're trying to do is fit the Rubik's Cube, as it were. So when this fellow is talking about the festivals and the traditional Jewish wedding ceremony, because I had been looking at the Torah, that unlike I had ever had in my life for a couple years, just reading through the first 5 books, all of a sudden in my mind there was a connection. The theme of Passover and the first step of the wedding ceremony, the theme, the idea of unleavened bread and the next step of the ceremony, seemed to match the theme of the first day of creation, where Yahweh out of the darkness said, let there be light. And then the next day separated water from water. What's that got to do with Passover and unleavened bread, which we're in right now? We're in the festival of unleavened bread. Passover, what happened there? The Jews, the Israelites, all 12 tribes. It's not just about the one. This isn't Jewish versus Christian. All 12 tribes, we've lost our identity. We've been scattered across the face of the earth. And when I say we, there's something in the scripture that says, don't talk about they like it was a foreign people a long time ago that you have nothing to do with. Speak of these things like it's us. It happened to us. We have lost our way. We betrayed the covenant. We have lost our identity. We've been scattered. We are returning, as per these words. We were in captivity in Egypt, beaten with whips and oppression, injustice, another voice of authority barking at us, chewing on us, clubbing us, stealing our possessions and our family members. We were, the word Mitzrayim, which is Egypt, is rocks that are just pushing and crunching, and we're in between trying to slip through and grind it. That's what the word Mitzrayim means. We were in that place, and Yahweh says, I took you out of that and made you my own personal possession. That's like saying there's darkness, there's tohu vebohu, formless and void, nothing of any worth of life, and Yahweh says, Yehi or, causing light to suddenly appear. That's taking the day of creation and the first festival. Well, that's just like this Mishkan pattern where in the middle of the wilderness of darkness, there's a big white fence, and there's this pillar of fire at night lighting up, illuminating this big white linen fence, shining like a lamp in the middle of the darkness. Thematically, it's similar to, there was darkness and waste and void, and Yahweh said, Yehi or, boom! In English, let there be light. Do you see that concept? The first beatitude, Yeshua, sitting on the mount there, in Matthew 5 says, blessed are the poor in spirit. Poor in spirit. There's a picture of Tony Robbins. I got nothing against him, but he was coming to Portland the other day, and I saw the billboard, and there's a side view shot of him, like roaring like a lion. Wow, go to Tony Robbins and you'll learn the 10 points of how to get to that consciousness. That doesn't look to me like poor in spirit. But yet, Tony Robbins has figured out how to be a success in life, and he's now given him a few $1,000 or whatever it is, and you too can be a success in life. But Yeshua is sitting on this mountaintop saying, to be a success in life, you have to be poor in spirit. You have to walk humbly before your God. And that word humbly, I'm trying to show you, it's kind of like bent down. That's literally what the word means. It's like, oh, come on, nobody wants to go around like that. Gosh, you go to Brendan, she teaches you how to stand up straight. And so there's this conflict. How do you be Tony Robbins and how do you walk humbly? And Yeshua said, he went on. He said, the reason why the poor in spirit are blessed. Now, before I finish the sentence, picture the mind of poor in spirit. Maybe the circumstances of your finances or your health or your relationship or your job or your expectations of life, and you're just going, I feel whooped. I feel beat. I feel like I'm not just living up to my potential. What do? You either just keep falling down into the dust, or you go to Tony Robbins and have him tell you how to stand up, or you turn to the big white fence of Yahweh's name, Yod-Heh Vav-Heh, and you realize he said, I put before you life and death. You choose. I suggest you choose life. And Moshe left it simple as that. Life and death. Choose life. The person who's such a success, it's like, why change anything? But the person who feels, I need something different. I need to have some hope. I need to have some life. I need to have something turn this around. If they can turn to that big white fence, then the remarkable promise of Yahweh is just like he plucked them out of Egypt with 10 astounding plagues and brought them to a place of deliverance and provision and said, now I, the creator of the universe, make you my own personal possession. You are now my responsibility. I will take care of all your needs. I will heal you. I will protect you. I will call you dear to my heart. You are as precious as my own pupil of my eye, and yet you are the twinkle of my eye. You are the source of my pride and joy. Wow. What an astounding privilege. And it's accessible. It's available. And Yeshua said, the only way to get there is to humble yourself and say, yes, please, I would like that. Can I please have it? Will you really please give it to me? And ask. You have to humble yourself to ask, not go in and grab it and demand it. There's more to that picture, which we can't go into for the sake of time, but what I'm trying to show you is the staging of the pattern. The big white fence in the wilderness of otherwise darkness with a pillar of fire illuminating the camp supernaturally, but yet engaging with the natural world. Yeah, it's a supernatural fire, but it lit their camp. And the cloud over the top protected them from the sun during the day and kept them cool. That was real, tangible, earth-bound reality. So this letter Kuf, our letter Q, is drawn as this motif of a pillar of fire and clouds of smoke. It's connecting the realm of the spiritual with the realm of the terrestrial, which was what man is supposed to do. Man is the connector between heaven and earth. And as we pray, the concerns of earth are lifted up to heaven, and the resources of heaven are brought down to earth. So the Cohen is the guy in the middle, the intermediary. Like we said, the word Tabanit, my son, it's not just Yeshua, it's you. Your prayers, your beliefs, your words connect heaven to earth powerfully, significantly. Behold, hey, gladly, pleasingly, Hana, here it is, Eureka. This is the stuff he gave us by calling us to his fenced. It's not for everybody. You got to come to him. You got to come to Yahweh. That's the pattern. So when I saw somehow in this pattern simply the 7 days of creation, the 7 festivals, and the tent, the Mishkan pattern, those 3 things, that establishes the pattern. And then in trying to figure out, well, gee, 7's the perfect number. Maybe there's 7 places where I could find the pattern. Pattern of 7. Hey, like the 7 churches in Revelation. So I looked there. Yep, they seem to line up. And then, which we'll talk about later if we can get to it, Daniel 9:24 is the exact same pattern. And then I was looking through New Testament and Old Testament, thinking, well, maybe there's 7, and then I found more than 7. Well, maybe, 12? And found that. I found hundreds, literally hundreds, 400 or 500 places, literally, all through the scriptures from Genesis to Revelation, where this pattern was. And I realized there's a message in the pattern, like what we said before. If you see the pattern on the side of a cat and then the clouds and then the trees, and it's like, hey, maybe the message is in the pattern. So you look in the pattern, and what's the pattern? And you realize the pattern is organized in such a way that it's delivering a message. Because then when you go and you compare and it's the exact same pattern as the Beatitudes, then you just plug in what Yeshua said in the Beatitudes to the pattern, and it makes sense because he's explaining the pattern. But if you didn't know there was a pattern of the Mishkan and you don't know anything about the festivals, then you can memorize the Beatitudes in Matthew and you'll never relate them to the festivals, the Moedim. And then you might even think, well, the festivals are for the Jews, and the Beatitudes are for the Christians, and not realize that they're exactly the same thing. There's a message in the pattern. And the more I saw about the pattern, I realized that the actual message to tell the Nigerians is you could just show them these 7 elements of the Mishkan, and they're self-explanatory, self-referential. The fence, the barbecue grill, the laver. The fence, and then inside the fence was the barbecue grill and the laver. And then there's a covered place. And in the covered place is a lampstand, a table with bread, and an altar of incense. And then there's a veil, and then there's a treasure chest, the Ark of the Covenant. And then you could sit there and say, oh, come on, how's there a message? I could challenge you to try this. Find somebody that doesn't know anything about this stuff and show them a series of pictures. Just go this, say a bunch of symbols. So if I said to you, here's a big fence, and it's happened to have 1 door. What do you think of? In the interest of time, I won't elaborate this right now. We could, but I'm trying to keep your, You could say home. You could even say this is a jail, or you could even say this is a sheepfold. But as that, I could even say, hey, look, this is surrounded actually by a moat, which is another part of the story, and that moat even maybe has crocodiles in it with big sharp teeth. If that's a moat, then this is actually more like a picture of a castle. It's all the same type of thing, right? And then if I say, okay, inside the fence, right inside there, There's a barbecue grill. In fact, let's go ahead and go through the thing, just so you get the point. What does a barbecue grill make you think of? Food? What else? And again, listen, just so you know, there's no not right or wrong answers to this. This isn't tricks. This is just saying, consider yourself Nigerians. Here, put my theory to the test. You guys don't know what I'm talking about. You don't know the Mishkan pattern. You don't know, say you've never read the book of Leviticus. This has nothing to do with Exodus 25. Meat.
Smoke and aroma.
Sacrifice. Because not only did Yahweh do it, but the pagans.
There was one other word, smoke, aroma, and fire. Any other thing? Huh? Warmth? Okay, heat. Okay. Okay, tell you what, let's go to the next one here. This is a wash basin. A wash basin or a laver. What do you think of?
Clean. Refreshing.
Well, as a bird bath, that would go back to clean, refreshing water. Any other concepts or feelings, thoughts, concepts, not necessarily objects, or reflection? Did you have your hand up back there? No? A container? Okay, how about, happens to be a menorah shape, but how about something shaped like that that's a lampstand? This is like one of those ink blot Rorschach tests, right? What comes to mind? Boof. What? I still can't hear you. Sight? As such, you could say, well, that's light in a dark place. Light in dark.
I'd say
7? Anything else? Okay, the next one would be, here's a table with 2 stacks of bread. Stacks of bread here and stacks of bread here. Huh?
More food.
Food? Fellowship? Huh? 12? Well, there was 2 stacks of 6, so that's 12. Offering? Anything else? Bread? Huh? Food, nourishment, fellowship, bread, you know, that all boils down to something about life. Okay, next thing we have is an altar of incense, which is to say, the easiest thing to recognize there is I know that the Buddhists and the Hindus seem to have that as a traditional thing, more so than Christians, but the Catholics have this censer. But so think of that when I'm saying here's this offering plate sort of incense going up. So what do you think of with that? Smell or aroma. And prayer. Smoke. Anything else? What? I can't hear you. Shekinah? The word Shekinah literally means presence. So what you're actually, I think, kind of saying here is a spiritual encounter. Well, but still, I mean, there's this sense of a spiritual encounter, which is probably why these guys do incense. So I'll just write spiritual contact, maybe. Anything else? Okay, one more, because there's a separation here. There's actually a separation here. But what the next thing here, I'll draw like this, which is, I'll just call it a treasure box. Anything else? Mercy. Presence. Reward.
Secrets.
What?
Secrets?
Secrets.
Not everybody might know what's inside, right?
Sure.
Promise. Torah.
Anything else? Okay, now, let's suggest that you went to the Nigerians who don't, just so you know, that was 2004, and as of now, because of this Colo app, Wycliffe has sent people in there to teach them how to read, them meaning some of the people. They took a basic commercial trade. Picture this. There's 500 or so different languages in Nigeria. Imagine if every city in Canada and the United States had a different language. And then people try to mix up and communicate, and there's one kind of common trade language, kind of, sort of. How in the world do you get along together? I mean, you're automatically alienated, just like the Tower of Babel. That's what it was for, is to separate people. So they're already at that disadvantage, never knowing the Bible. So when you mention the word Torah, no, what is that? That's another foreign word. And then I'm suggesting that there's something about this pattern and these symbols that Yahweh himself designed. You see, when Moshe went up to Mount Sinai and Yahweh showed him the pattern. Now picture this. You go back to Genesis chapter 1, and he had the 7 days of creation. And right at the beginning of Genesis chapter 2, it says, "Thus everything in heaven and earth was finished, and all its array." That means everything associated with every piece. So here's a question. When Moshe goes up to Mount Sinai and Yahweh shows him this pattern, when did he make that pattern? It had to be back there at least at Genesis 1, and maybe even before that, and yet here we are in Exodus 25. So Yahweh didn't just make up something new. This pattern was established from the beginning. And since you already know that I'm suggesting this pattern is in the alphabet, and the alphabet was the first word in Genesis 1, then this pattern is actually the formula or the to-do list, checking off 1 through 7, that pre-existed creation. So what I'm trying to show you is that what I think, if you went over to Egypt and dug around in the sand and found an ancient artifact going back 4,000 years, or 40,000 years, or it's a piece of a star, so it's 40 million years old. This alphabet and what it means is older than that. This alphabet was made before the heavens and the earth, because this alphabet determined that on day 4, the sun, moon, and stars were going to be lit up. That makes this alphabet. Remember, in John 1, first he made the Word, and then the Word became flesh and walks among us. So this alphabet even is, in a way, older than the manifestation of Yeshua as the one we think of. Yes? They only go back 2,500 years. You can see that on YouTube. Which is the time of the Tower of Babel. So there's a thing on YouTube about the Chinese language having the Bible in creation embedded within it, and it goes back to 2,500 years ago, or 2,500 BC, excuse me, and that first emperor who developed and concocted and wrote out the Chinese language with pictographs incorporates the stories of the Garden of Eden, Noah's Ark, and the Tower of Babel. All the three stories before the Tower of Babel, and so it's evidence, do the detective work, it's the evidence that the guy who started the Chinese language came from the Tower of Babel, headed east, planted himself there, developed the Chinese Empire in the Orient, and it's right there embedded in the language. You can see that on YouTube. But this language, Hebrew, is even older. Now, let me tell you this. What I'm telling you right now, none of the world historian, linguists, scientists agree with me. They'll all tell you that I'm a raving idiot. Nobody will agree. Isaac Moseson doesn't want to listen. So, when I'm telling you these things, take it with a grain of salt. Figure it out for yourself. Throw me under the bus if you want, huh? I can't hear you. No, I didn't get this from other authors. No other author I have ever read is telling you about the Mishkan pattern. I'm telling you where I discovered this is I was sitting in this congregation after asking Yahweh, what do you give the Nigerians? And the preacher said, here's the 7 festivals, the Moedim, and here's the traditional wedding ceremony of the Jews. And in my mind, all of a sudden, I saw the connection with the 7 days and the Mishkan pattern. And it was a year later that I saw that pattern, after seeing it 400 or 500 times in Scripture, I then saw that it was the basis of the alphabet. So I did not read this anywhere, just so you know. And I'm trying to tell you the source so that if you see it, it's you seeing it. It has nothing to do with me. Either this stuff stands on its own or it doesn't. I'm not trying to say, gee, I'm so smart. I'm trying to tell you that I think this was Yahweh giving an answer to what do you give to a people who has no written language. Excuse me? The symbols are, go to Exodus 25. Yahweh called him up and said, this is how you build the tabernacle. There's a big white linen fence, and right inside the door is a barbecue grill, and then halfway between the door and the tent is a wash basin. Inside the tent is a menorah, and he tells how to make it with 7 arms, and there's a table of bread, and there's an altar of incense, and then there's a veil, and then there's an Ark of the Covenant. And he says very specifically, this is how you build it. It's right there. I didn't make it up, nor did I read any other author telling anything about a symbolism or a connection or a pattern. And it wasn't until I started looking at Hebrew, which was even another year later. As a matter of fact, when I started to print up this thing, I misspelled the word tabanit. And if you ever see a copy of this, where that's written in black, you'll see I shifted 2 of the letters by mistake. It says tabanti, and I was looking at it and go, wow, no, I misspelled the word. I must have been to the printer, just so you know, 100 times or more trying to refine this chart. And I left it in red because it's such an important word. And only when I started learning Hebrew, and I saw that the word was spelled Tav, Bet Nun Yod Tav. Hey, look at that. Isn't that interesting? The word Beni is my son, and it's mediating the signers of a contract with 2 X's. It's like, whoa, hey, look at it. It's in the pattern. There's something written in the words. I didn't read that anywhere, but it's there in the words. Yes?
Well, not only that is, is a picture of the pattern, but it's also the whole story of Yeshua.
Oh.
So if I was on the language, I could easily, just with those pictures, tell the whole story of his birth.
Okay, so here's my point. I'm suggesting, just like she said, if this is all you had, 7 images that Yahweh himself designed as the pattern, and the fact that in Hebrew the word pattern means my son is in the middle of all this, the Jews do not believe, because their rabbis have told them it's a lie, that Yeshua is the son of Elohim, or Ben Adam, in human form as a man, or that he has anything credible to say. Could you show somebody who's a Jew in this pattern? Could you show somebody who's Islam? Could you show somebody who's a Nigerian who's only learned from their witch doctors? Could you show them the truth of the Torah, of salvation, of the kingdom of heaven, just in these patterns? It's Yahweh's plan. I had nothing to do with it. But here's the matter. We could spend the next 2 hours going over this, which we can, but let me just show you the Beatitudes. Okay? So now I'm stepping out of the Old Testament, right up there to the mount where Yeshua is sitting. And he says, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom. He's offering them to come inside the fence. You step into the kingdom, and if you look at the pattern, this barbecue grill wasn't necessarily 15 feet inside, so you open up the gate and you step in and you walk over there. It says it was right inside the gate. Now, it might mean right inside the gate. But think about this. Well, first of all, let me back up to the fence. There was a 4-colored door. There was blue. Oh, we don't have blue. Anyway, there was blue, purple, red, and then there was white linen, and then there was some gold threads, right? So what's that? There was one door, just one way in. Blue. What do you think of when you see blue? Truth, royalty, law. Okay, something. Why is the sky blue? We're under the law. What law? The law of the Creator. The guy that made this place, his voice determines the law. Elkona, I made it, it's mine. That's what Elkona means. So if blue says something about the guy that made this place gets to determine the law, then I might say, well, the blue lines up with the hand of the letter Yod. What do you think of when you see purple? Royalty. Well, gee, what is the Torah? Royal decrees and edicts and proclamations and declarations. This is the stuff of royalty. So that would be the hay. What do you think of when you see red? Blood, humanity. The word Adam means red earth. So hey, that's the Messiah, which is the Vav, man. What do you think of when you see white? White linen. Purity. The Holy Spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh's job is to lead us into the ways of pure truth so we could have robes of righteousness, righteously doing everything he said. So Yod He Vav He could be seen as blue, purple, red, white. So when I think of blue, purple, red, white on the door of the Mishkan, one way in. What's that one way in? The name of Yahweh, not just how do you pronounce it, but what does it mean, letter by letter. So one way into the kingdom. Blessed are the pure, poor in spirit, for there's the kingdom of heaven. You open the door, whoa, hey, this is great, and you step in and there's a barbecue grill. But what did Yeshua say? Blessed are they who mourn. Wait a minute. I thought we were having a grand old time. Why should you step in the door and mourn? Can anybody give me an idea of, now don't excuse it, but just think.
Your flesh is going to get roasted.
Your flesh might get roasted. That would be a good, it's like, uh-oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. I thought you were just offering me life. If you're offering me life, death or life, and you step in the door, it looks like you're now offering me death. Is this a trick? What do you mean, offer me life and then tell me to roast my flesh? That sounds like painful and death. Well,
That's the refiner's fire.
the refiner's fire. So in other words, you don't just come in with all your baggage of all your stuff of your decadent life and say, hey, we're going to come in and party. You're going to come in and throw your stuff on that altar. What happens on an altar? You ever take a chunk of meat and put it on the altar? What happens? Some stuff stays on the barbecue grill, but other stuff goes through because this barbecue grill is like a filter. The second festival is Chag HaMatzot, matzah. The word matzot also means find out how to do something. You step into the kingdom of life, woohoo, and right inside the gate, now find out how to do it. And how do you do it? You stick your stuff on the grill, and some drips through and some stays there. So what goes through the grill and gets cleaned up and burned off? Christmas, Easter, Sunday, Halloween, a few traditions of men, and what stays up there? The stuff that's of substance worth staying there. If you contemplate these things and apply them to the Beatitudes, you can now say, you step into the kingdom and all of a sudden you have an awareness. I'm going to pick on you for a moment, Ben. You lived of what some people would call a successful life in the world, meaning you had the money and the prestige to do anything you wanted. How did you feel when you suddenly became aware of the truth of the Torah?
I came by my humbleness, so I was happy to find something that filled my heart.
Did you have any regret of the way you'd lived your life, of time lost? You did?
Yes and no, because I didn't quit the world because I didn't like it. The flesh loves it. But I woke up that it's not right.
Okay, so there's something about, just to keep on track, there's something about, in my mind, for more, why would you mourn? Blessed are they who mourn. All of a sudden you realize, wait a minute, I've been living all these years a lie, not true, distorted, bad teaching. How many years did I waste?
Well, that's why you go hard now the other way.
That's why. But when you realize how many years you wasted, and then you think of all your other friends and family who are still out in the darkness, and you go, now I feel bad for them. Once you learn that, I'm suggesting that this is actually the Torah. Learning the instructions. And there's a reason to mourn. But he said, but they will be comforted. Why? Well, what's in front of them to comfort it? Clean water, reflection. That sounds like comfort, but what does he say there? Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. What did he do on day 3? Here he separated water from water, like you're separating matzah from leaven from unleavened. Can you notice the difference of leaven and unleavened? You can see the difference in the bread, but the leavening is kind of these invisible spores. But leaven and unleavened look kind of the same thing. They're dealing with bread. Water from water, separating above it. It's still water. You're separating stuff that looks like the same thing. Traditions and holidays, you're separating laws and regulations and customs. So you step in, and that's what you start doing. And then the bronze laver was made out of the mirrors of the women, highly polished, refined metal, and as you look into it, you see yourself. So if you to plug in another piece of the formula, Yeshua said, his word is the seed. And just like Adam and Hua had to go back and till the ground where they were taken from, the Garden of Eden also maps to this pattern, by the way. They go back and tilling the lines are like lines on the barbecue grill, and the seed dropped into the lines is kind of like this seed of his word going in as we teach and learn back and forth, line upon line, precept upon precept, as you read. And then, you know where the model comes from? Ask Jesus into your heart. It's nowhere in the scripture. It doesn't even exist in the New Testament. It's take that seed into your innermost part, like having a seed planted in your womb for you females. And then what do? You nurture, you tend, you wrap your emotions around it, you bring the life out as it grows and develops, which lines up with 49 days of counting until birthday number 50, Shavuot. That's the third day where he spoke seed life into the soil. And then in Genesis 2 it says, well, the plants hadn't sprouted yet. There was no rain and there's no man to tend it. But as soon as he put man in there, then the seeds started sprouting up. So when you see these pictures of the third day of creation, boom, suddenly there's all these plants and stuff. Well, maybe not so. That's not exactly what it says. The point is, this has to do with seed. Seed within you. When you step into the kingdom and ask him to put his seed in you, that's, Yeshua is the word made flesh, that's asking Yeshua into your heart, into your innermost part, and then like the reflection of yourself, made out of the reflection of the bronze mirrors of the women, you look at yourself, you tend yourself, you make yourself look right because you're nurturing your own heart attitude about his words. Somebody had their hand up, yes. Well, it's an altar of burnt offering, but it's a barbecue grill, essentially. Anyway, if we go to then, this was out in the outside, and then we go to the inside. But this is where Michael Rood was saying the feast of the Lord. This is the spring feast. Pesach, unleavened bread, and Shavuot, the 50 days of counting. Now, if you see other people talk about this, which is most other people, including the Jews who should know better, they'll tell you there's 4 spring feasts. I'm suggesting this is like teeth on a key, and if you have the wrong key, it's going to open up a different door. What I'm telling you, according to this pattern, according to my reckoning, is that there's 3 spring feasts and 4 fall feasts. they'll tell you there's 4 spring feasts and 3 small fall feasts, because what they do, I'm going to say, this is Feast of Trumpets, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, and Shemini Atzeret. But they don't count Shemini Atzeret, so they split Shavuot into 2 festivals. One is Bikurim, or first fruits, where you lift up the first fruit cut, count 50 days later, and then you have a festival of the lifting up the loaves. And I'm saying that the pattern is a pregnancy. Take the seed in is conception, 50 days later giving birth is Yovel or Jubilee. And by doing that, it lines up with the letters of the alphabet, which we could get to in a minute, but this lines up with, in the blue here, Pesach lines up with Het, Tet, Yod. And the reason why, Het is a fence, Tet is a basket, and Yod means my. So we come to him, he puts us in his basket and says, you're mine. So Het, Tet, Yod line up with Pesach. The Torah lines up with the lines of the barbecue grill, like the lines of the open hand. And Kaf and Lamed, Lamed means teach and learn. Mem is a womb, and Nun is the fish that lives in the water that jumps out, or the baby developing the womb that jumps out, and it's all part of gestation. And the theme of Shavuot is all the theme of the Mem Nun stuff. In Paleo, the letter Samik is a engineered structure just like the menorah. And what he said was, choose life, learn the instructions, take the matters to heart, and then do what I said. Bear fruit. The menorah bears the fruit of light. The shofar on Yom Teruah bears the fruit with the breath in it of sound. He's, like we were reading in Daniel 12, the wicked will do wickedly, and none of the wicked will understand because they don't regard his stuff. But the righteous will understand. They'll choose life, learn his instructions, take it to heart, and bear fruit. Do what he said. Galatians, bear that fruit. Yes, Ben. Tree of life, we're the branches, he's the vine. He gets lit, lights us. If you don't bear fruit, he said, my father's the husbandman, he'll break the branches off and throw them into the fire. Motif after motif, pattern after pattern, you can read all through Scripture and fit it in. And then you come up here, well, here, let me go, he says, blessed are the merciful, blessed are the meek, they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are they who hunger and thirst after righteousness, they will be filled. Menorah is filled with oil to produce the fruit of light. The shofar is filled with air to produce the fruit of sound. I'm just trying to logically pattern reasoning. This is all just logic. I'm not trying to pull any funny business. No smoke and mirrors. The only smoke and mirrors are the smoke from this and the mirror from that. Then he goes up here and says, blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. So I draw this little symbol of scales of balance. What you put in this side will be balanced back. That's mishpat. The measure you use will be measured to you, so be careful. The ayin, lining up with the letter ayin here, is a fruit with a seed in it. The things you do bear fruit. That fruit has a seed. That seed gets replanted, and your great-children, great-grandchildren will eat that fruit 3-4 generations later. Everything you do is like a seed planted in the ground, for good or for bad, and you'll 30, 60, 100-fold, so be careful the fruit you plant. And if you planted the wrong fruit, you better ask him to rip that stuff out of the ground. But even David was forgiven, but he says, hey, you brought the sword to your family for the rest of your generations. The rebellion of Absalom, the murder of the brothers, and on and on. This stuff has serious consequences. But what does he say here? Blessed are the merciful. I'm telling you the way the kingdom works. What you do. So here's another little insight. You do something wrong, you say, oh, please have mercy on me. In fact, there's a story. One of Napoleon's soldiers did something wrong. He pleaded for mercy, and Napoleon said, no, execute him. Napoleon's mother came and said, please give him mercy. No, he doesn't deserve mercy. And the mother said, if he deserved it, that wouldn't be mercy. That's justice. Mercy is getting what you don't deserve. And then Napoleon took that to heart and said, you're right. Okay, I will grant him mercy. Napoleon becoming aware of this higher order principle decided to operate in this other venue. Not of justice, but mercy. So if we say, hey, can I have some mercy? I've offended you. And if you said you don't deserve it, smack, you're entitled to do that. That's justice. But what Yeshua said is, blessed are the merciful, because they will receive mercy later. So here, we're talking about balancing the scales. How do you load the scales in your favor? Now while you can, every time somebody offends you, be merciful, be merciful, be merciful. Though you don't have to be, it's your choice, volition. Because you're trying to plug in and implement the ways of the kingdom. So eyeball, he's given you understanding of the way the kingdom works. And then you happen to bump into a guy with your car, and it's like, oh gosh, or you break something, it's like, oh, can I have some mercy? It's like, yes, because you've established in the scales mercy. And even if the guy says no, Yahweh himself will see that you get mercy at some point when you need it, because you were merciful, because that's the way the kingdom works. So, what's that? Forgive and you'll be forgiven. He said that again. So what I'm saying is that we can run all through the scripture now. I'm suggesting this is that plumb line. The plumb line and the yoke that on which hangs all the law and the Torah and the prophets and teachings. If this is true, you in your own study should be able to go back and read every verse, every parable, every story, every teaching, every principle, New Testament, Old Testament, and plug it in and see if it fits. And if it fits, then you could go to any illiterate person who's never read the Bible, who doesn't even have a language, show them these symbols, and it'll speak to their heart. Why? Because human consciousness is designed after this pattern. The very essence of our flesh, made out of the earth, is made out of these letters. And the one who has designed his communication to their nephesh, their consciousness, their ruach, is according to the hand fitting the glove of this pattern of him interfacing with the human creation according to this pattern. So this pattern's all him. And when you tell him of Yeshua, he's the guy that's the human embodiment of this pattern. So every one of his words of truth have to be able to fit on this pattern, as if this pattern itself was an engineered structure. This is like your closet, right? You've got these shelves, and you have this other stuff, and you bring something in, and or your pantry, and you stick it here and there. It's an organized structure whereby everything and anything that you can possibly think of, that can possibly happen in life to you, you stick on this organized structure. There's a place to put it. Excuse me? This is it.
You standing right there.
Well, humans embody the structure too, which is where Ben's been seeing the connections. Like I said, it's a fractal pattern. This same structure is all through creation. It's everywhere you look, if you can see it, which is why the pattern validates itself. So as you learn Hebrew, every time you see a het, tet, or yod, it's got something to do with possessing that which is in the fence. Just to play off that a little bit, what's the moat? Well, the Zion is a weapon. So and the Vav is that which is connects. So the Vav's almost like this bridge over the moat. So Vav Zion lines up with that which is outside. And what you're left with is Aleph through Hey here, and Resh Shin Tav over here. Well, the Kuf, the pillar of fire that was above the Ark of the Covenant, that's a little other matter. But what I'm saying is, these basic 7 principles is the entire message of the gospel, of the kingdom, of Torah, and of eternal life. So here, let's move on. If you jump into this, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see Elohim. That's maybe a promise, which it is, of saying, gee, one day we'll see him face to face. But this is prayer, spiritual contact, the truth of your heart. And because it lines up with Sukkot, it's the fellowship of the Kodashim, the holy ones, the set apart. It's like what we're doing here is exactly that. And it lines up with the letter Pei, which is the mouth, or that which opens. So something about when we open up our essence to speak to him, this other thing opens up, that we behold him, not with necessarily the physical eyes, but in each other, in the fellowship of Sukkot with each other. The spiritual realm opens up. Pei literally means that which opens up. And he says the prayers of his people are sweet savor to him. It's all a model, it's a pattern, it's a motif. This is describing his heart. And then in this separate place, he says, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called B'nai Elohim, the sons of Elohim, the daughters, the children of Elohim. Why? Because this is kind of like a total of all this. So what's the pattern? Choose life, leaving the darkness, learn his instructions, take it to heart, and quit resisting, and let this, if you're a human and you get pregnant, what comes out is another human. To kind of show you an overview in looking at all kinds of scriptures, what I've come convinced of, that new life that you nurture within you as you've taken the seed, it's not another baby, it's you. Amen. It's you that's going to jump out unto eternity. So the you that takes on this new form and lives unto eternity is the you that's nurtured as the seed of the Torah in your own inner self, that's manifested as it walks around in the caterpillar form, as it were, doing what he said to do. And this speaks of the letter Zadi, the resurrection unto, that's when, the whole new realm that we can only imagine. And so this is the promise, the hope set before us, Hatikva. The hope is not only that he will restore Israel in the here and now, that he promised this kingdom here, but Yeshua came saying, let me tell you about this other stuff on the other side. The other side of the Zadi, we can only see up to this fence. But he came telling us all the stuff inside the fence, and then what's like the letter Kuf, transcending. So you resurrect Zadi. The rising up could be metaphorical, whether we leave the planet or not, that's his business. That's on the other side of this veil. But the promise is, he's got these treasures which are for us. For us who desire to recognize Yeshua, to keep the commandments, and they're not irksome. They're not disgusting and loathsome. They're easy and light. They're not burdensome. It's like, wow, what can I do to please you? There's this word chafatz, is his pleasure. There's numerous words for pleasant, delightful. Shah, shinayan. Like in Yeshua, Yahusha, shasha is delight. The last of the Beatitudes says, blessed are you when men shall revile you and persecute you and say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. So that lines up with Kuf, which is this overview, this long reach. So after telling us all this, he then just goes all this overview all the way back and says, you really do walk around in the place of weapons in the darkness. But remember, blessed are you when they throw the weapon at you and curse you and say all manner of evil against you, because yours is a reward in heaven. And if you can not imagine that reward, just believe that there is one. As he said to Daniel, last verse, arise to your portion at the end of days. And you could say, well, I don't know what that portion is, it's just whatever. But if what I'm telling you has any merit of truth, the portion you get at the end of days is because you nurtured that seed when that noon jumps out of the mem. So this mem is water, so like this water here, and when that seed, which is yourself that you've nurtured because you've regarded as Torah, his words of instruction, that seed sprouting unto eternal life. So why do I say that? Let's look back at the Sophite letters. I was suggesting before that they're the syllabus of the Mashiach. What was he talking about? Kaf, there's an open hand, lining up with the Torah instructions, the teachings. Let me teach you about eternal life. There's what's called the closed mem, which is a closed womb, like a virgin birth. And he talks about being born unto eternity, not of the will of the flesh. So the first mem, of the normal mem, is an open mem, but this access to the eternal realm is a closed mem. It has nothing to do with the flesh. But what jumps out? The noon, life unto eternity. So how we process his Torah, that seed, is us forever. You want to have a good eternity? Regard his stuff, Kaf and Lamed, and process it in your mem, your inner self. And you can tell from your reflection in the mirror, as it were, as you introspect. Pei Zadi, Pei is the fellowship of the Kodoshim under eternity, in his presence. That's the great Sukkot of the universe for Leolam, under eternity. Imagine, here we are scattered across North American continent, and we come together for a week, and it's like, woo, this is great. Hey, you got any stories to tell from what you've been doing, and exploits of Yahweh's grandeur, how he saved you, how he beautified his Kadosh Shem, and your understanding? Well, let's hear them. But imagine, just imagine, that we're scattered through various dimensions of reality across various universes, or whatever that looks like. I mean, if he makes a new heaven and new earth, it may not be like this little pizza pie or blue marble, however you want to look at it. But what if we're scattered, and he says, hey, come on back to Sukkot. Every 360-day cycles, or 360 cycles, you get to come back for Sukkot. Wouldn't that be quite a kick after, everybody scattered hither and yon and come back forever? We get to come back and Sukkot every year, as it were. I mean, these festivals are him, so they're his heart. So it's not like he said he's going to do away with them once this terrestrial veil disappears. I mean, this is stuff of eternity that he's giving us now to whet our appetite and get a taste of. And Zadi is the standard modern Zadi. If you look at it, it's almost like a guy down on his knees like this, as a sense of this reverent worship, lining up with the Ark of the Covenant, symbolic of his presence. And what I see in the Sofit Zadi is standing there, standing in his presence. That's got to be the ultimate. Like the four cherubim with the faces in his presence, and all they can say is Kadosh, 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 because there's nothing else to say. You're at a loss for words. This is a picture of us doing that in his presence, in the secrets of his heart, the secrets of the universe, the secrets of his words, all laid out for us to play with and revel with. And all we had to do is choose life.
Hallelujah.
Tell the Nigerians. Like Bill said, tell everybody on your mailing list. I mean, when you see this, it's like, how do you get this message out? But just to bring you back to the original story, when I saw this, I tried to communicate with my brother. He was leaving the next day for Nigeria again. He couldn't hear me. They shot him up with vaccines so he could go, and I remember him sitting there and his eyes were like, it was at 10 o'clock at night and he had to get up early, and I thought, he took off, and I didn't have a computer, but I thought, I'll go to his church. They have a computer, and he has a computer. They can email him and say, hey, give it to those guys. And I went and talked to the assistant pastor, and the assistant pastor listened to me, and he said, we already have a curriculum. I said, no, you don't. My brother just said it's a big problem. Calm down, little boy. Out the door. And since then, that was 2004, and then I found the alphabet, which validated the entire thing in 2005. And so then it's been another 12 years of me trying to jump up and down and acting like a madman, saying, look, look, look. No, look at me, look at this. So that's where that's at. But, hey, look, it's evolved, man. So here, I'll show you one more thing, and then we can open up to you guys. But let's look at Daniel 12. Excuse me, Daniel 9:24. I'll show you the same pattern. And hopefully this will just rock your boats. Daniel. Okay, now, you asked the question. You asked the question the other day. This has nothing to do with me, just so you know. This has to do with Yahweh. But I have a hard time talking about this. You asked a question the other day. We talked about Daniel appealing for his people to come back to the promises of blessing after the curse. Daniel had read in the library, the records, the archives that Nebuchadnezzar had taken into captivity, that Jeremiah said it would. He did the calculations, and he said, Jeremiah said 70 years, it's been 70 years. Somebody in 2004 at Sukkot brought up the matter of 7 times 390 is 2,730, which comes to 2010. Somebody else did that calculation. I'd never heard of it my whole life. I printed this up in 2010. I was working on it, thinking about it, doing this stuff. Somebody invited me to go to Jerusalem for Sukkot in 2010. Jamie Louie and a guy named Darrell, I forget his last name, and Todd Bennett we met up with at the airport. Wasn't part of the trip. Excuse me? Walk in the Light series. I highly recommend Todd Bennett's books. We happened to bump into him at the airport, so we hung around with him. The guy is a wonderful man. I have nothing but good things to say about him, even though he's on a different calendar. The point is, we found ourselves on the 7th festival of Shemini Atzeret of 2010, the last day, the 22nd day of the 7th month, standing at Shiloh, the place where the Mishkan stood, until they desecrated the covenant, and it was demolished, and Yahweh said, Ichabod, my glory has departed from Israel. And the 4 of us men stood right there at the altar of incense. Holding up our hands, we felt the Ruach, and we petitioned Yahweh for the house of Ephraim, just like Daniel did for the house of Yehuda. Shemini Atzeret of 2010 on the altar of incense. We didn't plan that, but it happened just as the sun was going down and we had to skedaddle back to Jerusalem. Did that happen? Was that real? You said, has anybody petitioned Yahweh according to the contract so that we could come home? Yes. So now it's for us. What do we do? Daniel 9:24. Daniel is sitting there praying for his people, just like what we were saying. Gabriel was sent. Let me start at verse 20. I was still speaking, praying, confessing my sin and the sin of my people Israel, pouring out my supplication before Yahweh our Elohim, which is what we did for the house of Ephraim, for my Elohim's holy mountain, Kadosh Har. The Har, Haresh mountain is, behold, the Messiah. Haresh mountain. The Kadosh Messiah is not the Christian Jesus that I learned about. It's Yeshua, HaMashiach, the embodiment of the Torah and teaching us to walk straight unto eternal life. Every word of his instructions, true and beautiful. That's the way I read these words. I was still speaking in prayer when the man Gavriel, Gabor means champion, heroic, valiant, courageous, dominating, victorious, triumphant. Name of that one angel, Malak, whom I had seen in an earlier vision, back in Daniel's 8 and 7, which we'll hope to get to another day. He was lifted up in flight, approaching me about the time of the afternoon offering. He made me understand, and he spoke with me. He said, Daniel, I have gone forth now to teach you understanding. That's the word lamed, so there's something about us engaging with these words. Understanding is, verse 23 is the word bina. So he came to, the word is not lamed there, it's Shaquille. You know that basketball guy, Shaquille O'Neal? It's the same word. And that word Shaquille is not just teach, the way it's translated, but it's wise, it's clever, it's insightful, it's really ingenious. Really ingenious. And the word bina means view, regard, distinguish, clear, evident, explain, instruct, comprehension, be prudent, to think, have intelligence. All this is Shaquille Bina. I'm telling you, if you study the language, everything you're looking at and thinking, you're doing right now in your minds, these words. In reality, and Gabriel, the champion of our people, has come to give that to you. Not just open your head and dump it in, but allow your minds to function and process to see this and get it, and then walk in it and apply it and teach it as the Kohanim of the world, the kingdom of priests, to show the kingdom of Yahweh comprehensible. That's your job description if you want to do it. Of course, you could deny it, but that's okay. I'm not saying you're not saved, you're not going to heaven. You'll find some other place. He's got a place for you. You could choose to do this or not. It's up to you. It has nothing to do with me. Anyway, this is what he said. At the beginning of your supplications, the word went forth, and I have come to relate it for your beloved. Contemplate this matter. Use your head. Gain understanding. He's telling Daniel, you have to put your mind to this. I can only give you so much. That's what Gabriel said. In the vision, now here's what he said. 77s, and we can discuss this later another time. In the interest of time, we'll just cut to this other part. 77s have been decreed upon your people and upon your holy city in order to do 7 things. I'm going to show you here where these 7 things line up with the Mishkan pattern. So what I'm going to show you here is that the purpose of all the affliction, the purpose of the beast, the ram, the he-goat, Babylon, Assyria, Egypt, the US, the UK, the UN, the USSR, the purpose of all these monsters has been to push Israel to a place where they can do these 7 things to Yahweh's satisfaction. And it's a picture of Yeshua going away and preparing a place as the bride prepares herself. And when these 7 things happen, because we have done them with ourselves, then the time is ready for the Mashiach to bring the kingdom back and wed with his bride because she has made herself fit and clean. And I'll show you the 7 things. And you can determine whether the time is now or in the future to some other generation, or maybe it should have happened long ago. The first one says terminate transgression. But if you look at what that word really means, it basically says to fence or contain rebellion. The fence. Like a jail. This isn't the pasture of the nice place. This is take the rebellious attitude and quarantine it. If you can't get rid of it completely because it's human nature, fence it off and build walls around it and don't let it get out. Which means as a people, quit being rebellious. Just stop fighting against him. Just stop. And then put your efforts to containing it. And if you want to know the proof of it, which we could do later, is look at these words. Write down these words and analyze them. Look at the dictionary and we'll look at each word and break it down and you'll see what it means. Have you done that? Have you fenced off the rebellious attitude? Have you? You're saying no? Yes? Okay. Where's the proof that you've fenced off the rebellious attitude? We're here. We're sitting here at the festival. So that's the proof that at least some of us, at least some representative of the house of Ephraim, is there any house of Judah here? Okay, then a bunch of representatives of the house of Ephraim have officially been documented as having fenced off the rebellious attitude. This says to end sin. Well, I dare say as long as we're humans on the face of the earth, we can't do that, so this one's impossible. No, wait a minute, that's English. The word end there is het tav mem. Daniel was told to het tav mem and samik tav mem, the words and book, which is in Daniel 12, but if you look at the word het tav mem, that means to, I have to tell it by a story. If somebody comes to your door, some little kid, and says, hey, will you sign up for a subscription of a magazine? Okay, sure. And so you pay them $10, now you get Road and Track magazine for the next year. The subscription has to run out. And if you had to pay $10 a month, or like making car payments for a certain number of payments, you cannot get out of that contract. When you sign up for this particular type of contract, you must pay every installment until the subscription is used up. That's what this word means. So, when we sinned, our forefathers back there, it set us on a course of a certain amount of time until the end of that payment for that sin. Well, it's under the blood of Yeshua. Now that's a different payment for a different type of concept of sin. But this, he said, 7 times 390, 2,730. Assyria was taken over. They conquered the northern kingdom of Israel, the house of Ephraim, in 721 BC. Calculate. 2010. Shemini Atzeret. It's paid for. It's over. That het tav mem is finished, fulfilled. We've done our time. We have legal right to get out of jail. Just like Daniel was saying in chapter 9, house of Ephraim as of 2010, and standing right there at the place where the glory has departed, invoking his kavod to return to us, the northern kingdom of Israel, the lost 10 tribes. So let's check number 2 off the list. Number 3. Number 2, you break the Torah, and that's what you get. That lined up with that. Number 3, see that laver? This says, wipe away iniquity. The word is kapor, like Yom Kippur, and it means to wipe away as if it wasn't there, to wash off. What's the word iniquity? It's the attitude in our heart of rebelling, of having this sour bitterness. It all had to do with the mirrors of the women, the attitudes of our, you know how you tend the baby in your womb? The way we should tend his seed within us is with favor and nourishment. It's our emotional interior. It's our disposition. And he says, wash off. Just like water, just flood water and just get rid of the filth. Condition your inner attitude about being his people. I would think that the fact that you all are still sitting here is that we should be able to check that one off the list too. This is the evidence that we are in the midst of doing that. And with a good heart, it's our intention, which is why we're here. It's the evidence that this is where we're at. The next one, like the menorah, it says to bring in everlasting righteousness. Remember I said it lined up with blessed are they who hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they will be filled. To enter in or conduct in everlasting, that word olam can also mean worldwide, or to shine the light as a torch in the darkness so that the world can see the fruits of those who are filled with his ruach, which is what you get as you choose life, learn his instructions, and wipe away the iniquity, and to just be his people. It's not running around striving, it's just, he's the vine, we're the branch, just bear fruit. Be the light. The fruits of the Spirit in Galatians 5:22, gentleness, kindness, temperance, mercy, love, joy, peace. That's what allows the conducting in of righteousness. You doing that? Okay, we can check that one off the list. To confirm visions, lining up with the vision of balancing the scales. Do justice and righteousness so that justice and righteousness can happen. And the word righteousness, which is zadik, also means victory, deliverance, and salvation. So when we are doing righteousness, what's the balancing of scales? Whose vision is it talking about? Well, not only the vision of Joseph of Arimathea, who was waiting for that kingdom to manifest, not only the vision of Yochanan's father, who was anticipating, not only the vision of the Talmudim, who were, is it now you're going to restore the kingdom? Sorry, you guys, the lot of you rejected it, so now you got to go the full 2,730. We here at 2010, no wait, we're 2017, somebody said, and I'd have to look this up, I don't know where it is, that there was a 7-year rider attached. Now, whether or not that's true, even if it is true, we're still here at the 7-year rider, so I'd say we're at 2017. So one way or another, in my heart is the expectation that we're there. So whose vision is confirmed? We read in Ezekiel 36, or some of us last night were talking about it, but we read on tape, Jeremiah 30, it's Yahuwah's vision. He said, I have this great dream. I will be your Elohim, and you will be my people. And then I'm going to whoop all those guys that were chasing you. And he goes on about that. There's another word I was looking up one day, and the word was shivar. Shivar me timbers, you know, the pirate talk. What does that mean? Shiver me timbers. It's a Hebrew word. I think it's Shin Bet Resh. And shiver me timbers is like your legs are unstable, like you get to be an old guy, but it's also when you're so scared, your legs are, and Yahweh said, do not allow your enemies to see you do that in fear of them, or else I'm going to do to you what I was going to do to them. Do not shavar. Do not be afraid and tremble. But when I was looking up that word, it says to break. So cracked corn, you know, like what you feed your chickens, that's the same word. To break something down, like breaking down words into letters. But it also said to break a dream, like to give interpretation of a dream, is to, or like break the code so you can see what something means. And then my eyes went back and said, to break a dream? We broke Yahweh's dream. Our forefathers and the lot of us for all these years have broken his dream. He had a dream. He had a vision that he would be our Elohim and we would be his people. And because of our rebellion, because of our disregard and detest of his Torah, because of the iniquity of our heart, because we just didn't have to or didn't want to do what he said, we poked him in the eye. We crushed his dreams. When we do these things, it will confirm or fulfill. It'll be the time where his vision will manifest, not broken, made a reality. And prophets, the mouth, he said so. Nam Yahweh. He will have his vision. It doesn't matter what year this is. Time of the earth is used up. Oh, the beast is getting too big. Oh, they lit up Fukushima. Oop, they've destroyed the plants with Monsanto and the oil spills and the chemtrails. He made this place. He can turn it around. There's verses where he said that we were just looking last night that in an instant he will speak restoration to the land and bring us back there. Is that Ezekiel 36? I believe it was. We could look at that later. The point is, those guys that are wrecking this place have nothing to do with anything. It's us who broke his dream, and it's us who can turn it around by simply containing the rebellion, learning his words and doing them, taking the heart and washing away our iniquity. Stay plugged into Yeshua and bear his fruit. He promised that his vision will be fulfilled. And then the next word is Mashach Kadosh Kodashim. It's translated, anoint the most holy, but the word Mashach is tangible. Make the Kadosh a reality. This is the kadosh. What those letters mean, not by my interpretation or even by the pictures, but every letter is alive and has an essence and a heart, because it's His essence, His heart, His ruach. And Yeshua is the manifestation of every letter. So as we behold Him and copy Him doing just what He's doing, just like He said, it's not of me, it's of my Father. I only say what I hear Him saying. I only do what I see Him doing. And so can each of us. Walk as He walked. Yashar Derek. Do that stuff and make the Kadosh Kodashim a manifest reality by containing the rebellion, learning His Torah, taking it to heart, bearing His fruit. His vision, as He said, will manifest. Looks to me like that potential is here and now. And so I have the full expectation that any moment, anything can change. The teeter-totter shifts. If you're on a trajectory heading this way, and the teeter-totter shifts, what happened to all that stuff that you were anticipating? So we have a choice. We can anticipate the NWO and the beast and the Antichrist and that entire system to prevail and destroy us all, as some translations tell us, or we can look at these words from a different interpretation, retranslate them according to the actual kadosh meaning of the words, validated by the pattern. I mean, do you see in Daniel 9:24 the pattern of the Mishkan, which is in the Beatitudes and the 7 days and the 7 festivals? Isn't it the pattern? I got nothing to do with it. It's the pattern. And if that's His stuff, then why do we let anybody else tell us of a different reality? Because they've been empowered for 2,730 years. Because we didn't do this. So if we change our behavior, and then I could go and show you numerous verses proving it all. But look for yourself. Put on these spectacles and then read Scripture. Look in the dictionary. Every word will tell you so. The ball's in your hands.
Lucifer doesn't want us to know that, that's for sure.
Well, I'd say he was out of the camp at the moment, so we could pick it up and run.
I think that, in this, which I get really emotional, is He's just given us so much hope. Like, that's what I feel in this, is that, excuse me, that, like, we're always so focused on the negative stuff. And, that we see so much going on around us. We do feel like they have the power over us, but to me, seeing this, I just see that there's so much hope in Him, and that I'm so inspired, even though I have tears, I'm so inspired to know that He's so much more in control than we give Him credit for.
We had no idea. It's for the accommodation of an occasion like this. The world's out there. We can just sit and ponder His words.
I said this 2 days ago.
When I see these things, I'm drawn to look at His words even more. As Brenda said, there's a depth of things that you can't put into words. And I realized this is Yeshua. I'm not turning my back on Yeshua. I'm not turning my back on the instructions. I'm not lifting up a rabbi. I'm not lifting up the Pope. There's nothing to do with what country I happen to live in. It's like, gosh, this is the kingdom. This is Yahweh.
If I may, I have a testimony that we can.
Sure, absolutely. For what it's worth, anybody else wants to say anything, go ahead.
This is my journey, and I feel impressed to share it as briefly as possible as a testimony for this man's teaching. 5 years ago, I think I first met you over in BC. You came out to Tom Staple. He presented this here, and boy, was I enthused, and the excitement that coursed through me says, I got to get to know this here. And I became so overwhelmed with it that it almost sort of put it on the back shelf. 2 years ago, the Lord led me to this ministry was overwhelmed and I was very excited about it. And I knew in that excitement, which I believe was inspired by the Holy Spirit, telling me that this is truth. I was overwhelmed, and I sort of put it on the back shelf again because I really didn't know how to get started at it to make it meaningful in my life. I was wondering whether or not to come to this feast. There were a number of other ones that are around, but Yahweh impressed me, and through a number of circumstances and invitations and encouragements, I said, okay, I'm going to come. And here was Eric again. Eric, you have inspired me again, and I feel that excitement and that enthusiasm that I want to get to know more. But this time, the Lord had prepared me a little bit more. In my prayer life, I wanted to get to know Him more intimately, and I didn't know the plan as actually how to do that. The reason why I wanted to get to know Him more personally was because most of my life, my Christian life, at least the past 30 years, has been dealt in prophecy. And He's revealed to me that there is a pattern in prophecy, in every prophecy, that matches up based on sin, righteousness, and judgment to come. I see now that He wants me to understand this more because it is a pathway of getting to know Him more intimately. Because when I read prophecies now, and all the prophets spoke for our time, right now, bringing it all together, I can see what's happening in the world. He's showing me how He's working. And as I'm becoming more aware of that, righteousness is just coming into my life. It is so easy to receive His righteousness when you know His working. I want you to tell me how to fast track this here, because in a way you've said it's a lifetime. It's something that we possibly can't even learn it all in this lifetime. It's going to take eternity to really understand it. And it's helped me to understand more about what the scriptures tell us, that we will be learning more and more and more and more, and never really coming to a full understanding because there's going to be so much more. In what you said as far as your summation, I have to impress upon each one of you today, you need to come out of the world. Because it's only when you come out of the world that you're going to have time for this. Because if you don't come out of the world, Satan will pull you back in and make excuses and draw you back in so that we don't spend our time absorbing it and getting to know it. So that we can be a people that is able to stand and take a message to a world that is dying. And time, from my understanding, is very, very short. We are in the last days. Thank you.
Does anybody else want to? Go ahead, sure.
Just wanted to say that I immensely enjoyed my time here with everybody. I felt like Adam when Yahweh breathed into him, new life. To be around like-minded people, it's so far and few between these days, and I have to go to work tonight, and I just wanted to say I really appreciate everybody's fellowship. I'm going to really miss you, and I hope to see everybody again soon, and I hope I can see Eric again soon, and we can have some more teachings. It's been a blessing. That's all I can say. I've really enjoyed every minute of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim and Charlene, for making this all possible for all of us this week. Richard, too.
You really helped me a little, so.
of this would be here. Without Brenda.
Oh,
Here,
Yeah.
come here, come here. A number of years ago, Brenda called me up. Want to hear a Hebrew speaker? What's that? She says, guy speaks Hebrew. He talks about paleo. Sure, why not? So I went over there and she had it arranged. She had a meeting place there. Eric spoke to us 3 hours Friday night, 7 hours on Sabbath. Sunday morning I go to open my Bible to read. Somehow it didn't work anymore. It was fried. So I closed my Bible. I was excited about it. A little while later, I invited several couples over to my house, and my sister. One couple showed up, and my sister supported me. Thank you. I was embarrassed as could be, because I knew what I had. I knew what was there, and I wanted to get people in front of Eric. Didn't happen. The couple went sour badly, and so Brenda was the start of this. Okay, remember this. And I promised Eric. I says, I'll get more people in front of you. Because you're here, it's got nothing to do with me, nothing to do with me. It's the Ruach. That is why you're here. And I am so incredibly thankful for the Ruach to get people in front. People like Dan, your testimony here right now. It's just...
Well, I thank the Ruach for using you. Because by using you, I'm here.
Thank you, Brenda.
Brenda.
praise Abba. I've known Eric since, I think I told you yesterday, 2010, 2011. So anyway, this is off the cuff, and I'm going to have Eric help me out. Hopefully it'll only take 5 minutes. Okay, so this is about another pattern in the process of conception to birth.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you guys hear? She's talking rather quietly.
I wanted to keep that quiet.
Oh,
just for a
okay.
second, but you're going to tell me.
Do you want the microphone?
I'm giving him heads up. He's got to help me out. So today,
It'll go on in a minute.
okay. So today marks the week that I gained the title of grandma, my first grandchild, a grandson. And this morning I received pictures from my daughter who's over in BC. So this kind of, we're talking about patterns and how this works, how this Mishkan pattern works, or habits, patterns, habits. Okay, don't let verbiage distract you. So in the pattern of conception to birth is the festivals. Do you know that?
I've heard about that, yeah. But go ahead and elaborate.
Okay,
Because
well,
it's
help me out
this
here.
a great understanding.
Scary.
This is a pattern within the pattern, which is one of the ways that it works. When I said I found the pattern like 400 or 500 times in Scripture, quite often as one pattern is running, you'll find the other pattern, which is the same pattern, running within it, which is this fractal thing. So, and I did hear somebody say something about this, so this is very interesting.
Yes, so I just happen to have two daughters that were pregnant at the same time. Back in July and October I found out. Anyway, so the first month of the 14th day, the egg appears. What is the first day of the first month of the 14th day? Passover.
So that lines up with the letter Nun. And the Mem is an environment like water. Mem is water, and Nun is that which jumps out. So to say on the 14 appears, like jumping out of the Mem is like this hidden place. So that kind of fits, 14 jumping out of 13.
Okay, so the egg appears and it must be fertilized within 24 hours or the egg will pass on, okay? Then we get to the Feast of Unleavened Bread, when the seed/egg or grain that fell into the ground and died in order to produce a harvest or a first fruit.
So dealing with unleavened bread, now see, here's one of the things about the pattern, is that there are overlays, and like I said, a pattern within a pattern. So I pointed to the Nun, which is the 14th letter, and that looks like it's here, but this lines up with unleavened bread. But the 14th day is the day of Pesach, which is this. So you have to let your mind shift and slide back and forth, aligning these patterns, because there's a depth. It's not one-dimensional or two or three, it's hyperdimensional. So by her giving you these words, it'll line up but it may take a little bit of explanation, so not necessarily to do that, but Pesach is on the 14th day, and then what happens on unleavened bread?
That's when the seed or the egg or the grain that fell into the ground.
Like planting the seed in the soil, and Yeshua even talked about, you have to take a grain of wheat and it falls into the soil and dies. That's the nature of seed, is that life dies in order to regenerate another generation. So
That's right. So it becomes your first fruit, of which was presented to Yahuwah. So we know that the firstborn of the womb, help me out, the firstborn of the womb
belongs his personal possession.
is first.
He claims the firstborn of man and beast is his personal property.
Okay. Within 2 to 6 days, the fertilized egg attaches itself to the wall of the womb and begins to grow.
And that's where what's planted in the soil is pictured as attaching to the womb of the female, and she starts nourishing it with her own being.
Yep, so we're in the Feast of Unleavened, and is observed for 7 days after Passover.
With 7 days of unleavened bread,
Yep. Then we go to 50 days later.
which is the 50 days of counting Shavuot.
Yep. The embryo forms with arms, hands, fingers, legs, feet, toes, a head, eyes, etc. And it takes on the form of a human being, which shows up at Pentecost, or Shavuot.
Day 50. And this is also a pattern type of the 49 days of counting, and then the 50th day of Jubilee, or Yovel, like the 50 years, right? The 7 sevens and then the 50th year. So the days of Shavuot and the pattern of the Yovel is the same pattern, which is the same as gestation here.
Yes, and so in Psalm 119, you see the portions equals, there's 8 stances or sentences, verses, thank you, words, 8 meaning new beginning. So we've got this formed body. Okay, so on the 7th month, on the first day of the 7th month, this is cool. The baby's hearing is developed.
Just so you know, the first day of the 7th month is Yom Teruah. So now you've jumped from the spring feast, like this veil, you've now jumped to the fall feast. So that's why I'm saying this is like this key where you've got these 4 teeth on the fall and the 3 teeth on the spring.
So for the first time, the baby will hear outside of the womb on the time of...
And this is like the day of trumpets, of heralding Mashiach, like when Yeshua was born around the 7th month, whether it was the first day or the 15th, either way, it was the 7th month, not December 25th.
And then we go into the 10 days of awe.
There's 10 days between Yom Teruah and Yom Kippur. This is on the 10th day of the 7th month.
So on the 10th day of the 7th month, the hemoglobin of the blood changes from that of the mother to a self-sustaining baby. That's the Day of Atonement. The blood was taken into the Holy of Holies. Wow.
The day of Yom Kippur is where, when she said 10 days of awe, it's the Jewish tradition to take the 10 days here to just take some time to kind of reflect, look at yourself, consider your life, put your life into the scales of balance. Where am I lacking? And they say that wherever you're at by that day, as you present yourself before Him, it sets you up for the next year. Wherever the nation is at, as that one day where the Kohen HaGadol, the high priest, goes into the Kadosh Kodashim, the high Holy of Holies, and puts blood on the... If the priest was sour, if the people went bad, then they'd have a rotten year. So this is like where are you? It's like if you're doing pottery and you're working it and you put it in the kiln. If you've got bubbles, it'll explode. If you did a bad job, it'll fall, because the kiln is that which tests and proves it. Yom Kippur is the great day of somber, fasting, and because that's like putting it into the kiln. Bread comes out of the oven. The real you is locked in. So what I'm saying is these are motifs about the theme. And as she's saying, here's another layer of the pattern synchronous with each other.
So, Eric, what happens on the 7th month, the 15th day?
The beginning of Sukkot is the 15th day, and this is a 7-day festival, the 8th day of which would be that festival. So the 15th day is Sukkot, which is fellowship together in temporary dwellings of tents.
So with the baby, the lungs become fully developed. being born prior to this baby has difficult breathing. So we have the Feast of Tabernacles for 8 days, new beginning, breath.
Okay, so
Up into
breath,
Ruach.
the other picture of the pay is the breathing, even though hey, the fifth letter has to do with ha, breathing. Pay is also breathing and mouth and singing and speaking and eating and laughing and rejoicing. The command for that festival is ak sameach, only rejoice, which is a pay thing. And that's when the lungs are formed, and it has to do with the prayer. And what else did you say again?
Okay, well, that's likened to the Ruach, the breath and the Ruach, right? Okay, so then we have on the 9th day,
Well-
the 9th month and the 10th day.
Okay, now this is a 7-day festival. This would be the 8th day. And so after we keep Sukkot, he said there's one more day of stoppage. That's what the word Shemini Atzeret, 8th, and Atzeret means stoppage, which means don't work, keep this day. But now you've jumped into, after that, Kuf, after later on, a reach into later, and you get to what day?
The birth occurs.
Hallelujah.
And that's where the head appears, and after the Kuf is where the Resh comes out, and then Sheen taking on like spirit, life, fire, its own identity.
So what's that going to produce?
A new
Body.
a new
Hallelujah.
generation, an ongoing generation to serve Yahweh.
Our being, so here what Ben's saying, the model being in the human body is that he has created us after this pattern. And when it says Yeshua was made in the image of man, and man was made in the image of Elohim, some people think that Elohim, referenced by the Aleph, is a humanoid, arms, legs, torso. That's the image of man. Let me just say this. In my comprehension, for humans to be made in the image of Elohim, and he said, make no image of him, he gave us this word. This word is the image of Elohim. It's the lens. So we're made in that image, and then Yeshua came down through that into the image of the humanoid that Ben is talking about, with the hand and the arms. And if you look at the skeletal design and the organs and the nerves, you can see all his stuff in there. But the thing is, does that mean that the Father has a head and arms and legs? He said, we're his body. So now you have to take this imagery that we got from the church thing and plug it back into these words with this understanding, and it starts to create this new reality that we're just kind of groping at understanding. But when you see that it's in human gestation, perfectly fit, it validates that these things about the festivals in this pattern is very intentional. Like I say, when you see the pattern repeated in the cloud, in the tree, on the cat, in your soup, it's like, hey, something's going on. How many times do you need to see the pattern? Like the broccoli. The pattern's all through Scripture, not just Scripture, but psychology, and in the stars, and in human gestation. And I'll tell you, I'll bet you could look all over and find it and have other stories to come up here and say, hey, look, me might find the pattern places that you'll have a tale to tell.
And then he makes provision on the 8th day after the baby's born, especially if it's male, for circumcision.
And the thing about why I got kind of choked up talking about the day we stood at the altar of incense talking to him is because that's the 22nd day of the 7th month. And at Sukkot is the 15th day, and so the 8th day, it's like come back to fellowship with him. When Joshua went into the land, they hadn't been circumcised for the 40 years, so he got everybody together. Well, that was to take the Pesach, but the pattern is to rejoin the fellowship and circumcise your hearts on the 8th day. More patterns fitting, and it's like, gee, is there a message in the pattern? It's nice to believe so.
Obey my voice. The word, the letters.
He gave us his words.
You say, Eric, what did he say?
Does anybody else have anything they want to?
There's one thing I just wanted to add to what she said about the 8th day. Was like,
You want to say it loud enough that people can hear?
what she was saying about the 8th day with 8th day circumcision, the vitamin K in the baby boy is the highest content that it will ever be. So it's like it's an instant
it's like, how can that be possible through this evolutionary period that everybody thinks of? It's the perfect, it's just perfect. That's how it is. 8 days, vitamin K is so high, it's an instant clot. So the baby has, whatever it's going to feel, but it's not going to bleed to death. So that's all I really had to comment.
You know, there's one other little aspect of this circumcision, just for what it's worth. I've heard it said that, you know, every traumatic event affects your psychology, right? Especially if you're 8 days old, even though you don't remember it. And maybe there's something going on with why did he say that, is because all the men who had this happen to them when they're 8 days old, it's impressed, it's imprinted on their consciousness. And so when they get older, there's kind of this group. It wouldn't be achad, aleph het dalet, as in one, but there's this word yod het dalet, yechad, which is like the confederation of the tribes. And when you all have this thing done at 8 days, it imprints, and so you are thinking the same way later on. It conducts, or it forms a conduit, a path as it were, so that you have this camaraderie and way of dealing with things just because you all had this same thing locked in on the 8th day. Just another aspect to part of the mystery.